All right, to continue, I'm probably going to have this as a separate video because it's for those of you who don't make videos, when you have two separate shoots, if you're using just the YouTube editor, you have to upload each, which takes a while, and then you have to combine them, which takes a while. I'm starting to also prefer to make slightly shorter segments that I upload separately and calling them part 1, part 2, that sort of thing. So forgive me, this is a continuation of part 1. My last battery just died, and I actually luckily had a second battery in the car. So, as I was saying, I was talking about Rolex. My issues with Rolex are really the snobbery and wankery that comes from certain fans of the brand. And also, I don't resonate with some of the cultural significance of getting your Rolex. It's just not part of my own culture. It doesn't mean anything to me, right? It's just not. I'm not in the corporate world. If I was in the corporate world, I would get it. Yeah, you sometimes you want to get that watch that says, "Listen, I've made it. I'm now sitting in the boardroom. I need to wear a Rolex." But when I look at the watches themselves and the brand history and heritage, I have nothing but respect and appreciation. That said, I don't love their watches. I just don't. There are some Rolexes that I really, really like. There are even a few that if I'm in a situation to afford one, and I've gotten other watches first that I would like to get first, I could see myself getting. I could see myself getting a GMT Master 2 like Don Haynes's. I love that watch. Well, maybe not love it. I really, really like it. I could see myself getting a Submariner, no date, Sea Dweller type. Whatever the slightly larger one is, not the big one, what is it, blanking, the one that Jeffrey McMahon likes. It's the Big Daddy. So I could see myself getting a Submariner someday. As I've said before, there are watches that I will get first. Like I probably will get a Breitling Navitimer before a Rolex. I probably will get a Breguet Transatlantic before a Rolex. But this isn't bagging on Rolex. It's not saying Rolex is bad, and it's also not saying that the Breitling or whatever else I own or will own before owning a Rolex is a objectively better watch. It doesn't need to be an objectively better watch. What it needs to be is a subjectively more satisfying watch, because the reason I buy watches is for myself. It's not for you. It's not for the Rolex wearing wanker club. It's not for anyone else but my own enjoyment. It's not for the boardroom. It's not for my colleagues, my peers. It's for me. And so for me, the main thing is personal taste, is my own preference, which is informed by my knowledge, my ever-growing knowledge of horology. It's always limited. I don't know everything at all. I would consider myself a experienced amateur, right? I'm definitely not an expert on horology, but I've been doing this for a while, and I've spent way too much time on learning watches. So I'm definitely an experienced amateur, or maybe a beginning, or maybe an intermediate. Not quite a novice, an apprentice to horological knowledge. So back to this whole thing of snobbery. If I take that view, the two extremes on either side have a problem with it, because the snobs say, well, your personal taste doesn't matter. You obviously don't have good taste. And to me, that's just garbage. That's dog shit, that sort of attitude. That sort of snobbery. Because for one, it's not really understanding where I'm coming from. It's not understanding that I'm not saying that an Omega Seamaster is a better watch than a Rolex. I'm saying that I prefer the Omega Seamaster. I like it aesthetically, right? I like the way it looks on my wrist. I prefer the design of the Omega Seamaster. And furthermore, that the difference in the quality, the objective qualities, isn't enough to outweigh my personal taste and the much higher price. You see what I mean? Now, if for instance, I liked them the same, and then it would just be weighing the price, okay? I like the Rolex, I like the Omega the same. Now I have to look at the price and figure out, then I would say, well, I'm still gonna get the Omega because it's a much lower price. And that price doesn't offset the quality, because they're both good quality. It's just one's very good and one's really good, right? Now, if I liked the Rolex more, then I would have to decide whether that preference is enough to outweigh the cost difference. Does it make sense? I hope it does. So it's what I find is that a lot of snobs don't really have personal preference or taste, their own individual taste. What they do is they just learn about what the hierarchy is, what the viewpoint is, what the traditional horological worldview is, and that becomes their preference and their taste. Now, I would say that that's kind of a conformity. It's not individual. It's not. I would encourage those folks to say, well, what is it that you really like? Can you discover that? And maybe they would say, well, I like what the traditional horological view is, and that's fine. I can't really say otherwise. But some people are more individualistic than that in terms of their taste. Some people have their own individual personal taste that veers away from what the watch snob says, or what Archie Luxury says, or even what your sophisticated watchmakers and horological experts will say. I personally think that everyone has at least some degree of personal preference, but some people don't really connect with that or learn how to tap into that. They just conform to whatever the dominant worldview is, the dominant belief system, the alpha male perspective. And from having various run-ins with this sort of groupthink, they don't like it when you emphasize personal preference, because I think it's threatening to their sort of the cohesiveness of their worldview. Now, on the other hand, just because I don't want to be totally focused on that, there's the anti-snobs that don't like when you say that there is a difference in quality. There's the folks that will say, now very few people are this extreme, but some people will say it's all just personal preference. It's all about just what you like. You're not allowed to say a Rolex is a better watch than a Seiko SKX. You're even more not allowed to say a Rolex is a better watch than an Omega Seamaster. Now, maybe when it comes down to it, there's no person that actually believes that fully. But I actually do think I've seen people either in the comments of my videos or other places online that seem to have that viewpoint, that they think that ultimately it's completely subjective. Now, this isn't to say that how we choose to value things isn't completely subjective. That in the cosmic sense, a Rolex and an SKX Seiko, they're just chunks of metal and machinery, and what does it really matter? If there's a zombie apocalypse, one doesn't have more value than the other, except as far as it keeps time and is reliable, has water resistance and all that, which doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with the price. I mean, it does to some degree. But how we choose to value things is subjective, right? So even if you're just completely buying into the horological traditionalism and you just believe whatever the alpha watch males say, you're still choosing to do that. You're choosing to give up your autonomy and your individuality. That's what you're choosing to value. that's kind of what I'm getting at with personal taste and preference. Even those who have no seeming sense of their own style and taste and just like to, go with whatever the top dogs say, they're still choosing to do so, right? They could actually walk away and say, you know what, I'm going to try to figure out who I am. I don't want to just listen to whatever the strongest kid in the schoolyard is saying. I want to figure out who I am and what I believe and what I like. That I advocate for that approach because I think it's much more interesting and enjoyable to develop your own style and taste and so forth. It's a little lonelier because you're going out on your own, but you're still choosing to be a conformist, even if that's, So anyways, and maybe you could say, as I'm talking, I realize that I have a certain snobbery around this, which is that I tend to be snobbish towards individualism, towards personal preference, finding your own path. Maybe that's true. Maybe we're all snobs in one way or another. But I think the main thing, and this goes back to the previous video, the main thing is the attitude. Like I don't consider myself a snob. On one hand, in the second sense of the word, I'm definitely a beer snob. I don't want to drink crappy beer. Life is too short to drink crappy beer. But I don't look down upon or not want to associate people who drink crappy beer. Now I might say, well, I don't think they really have good taste in beer. So that could be the area in which I'm a snob. Just as somebody I've been kind of, maybe not blatantly told this, but a couple times I've been told, probably on the, what's that, the MDWE, the watch enthusiast Facebook group that I got kicked out of for making up with TGV. That's a whole other thing. But basically told I have bad taste or I'm not a true enthusiast because I like watches that aren't as good as they should be, or whatever it is, right? Maybe that's the equivalent. I don't know. I don't think, I think in the same way with beer, some people have different values than I, as far as like beer goes. Now for me, there's real objective measurements. And I also have personal preference in terms of I prefer IPAs. I don't like Pilsners at all. I find Pilsners to be really boring. That doesn't mean I don't recognize that there are high quality craft Pilsners. And I would prefer them to low quality Pilsners. But when I go to the store, I buy an IPA. And I prefer actually a middle of the road IPA to a great Pilsner, because I just prefer the IPA taste. A lot of people that get into beer, they fall into the IPA vortex. It's hard to get out of. Once you get into IPAs, it's really, really hard to get out of. And I haven't been able... I do enjoy on occasion, I'll get like a good stout or brown ale or something. But almost always I find myself wanting that IPA hoppiness. It's sort of a real specific thing. So I'm rambling on. I hope that addressed this whole issue of snobbery. Again, to sum up, there's two aspects that are brought together and conflated and confused, and I think we need to tease them apart. I think that will go a long way to ending the watch snob wars. One aspect is the snobbish attitude, which really there's no point to it. It's all the snobbish attitude only has to do with being a jackass, being insecure, or just wanting to be a jerk. It's like it's like the trolls that I have people that comment on some of my videos, all they do is saying, your watches are dog shit. That's all they say. And I've kind of laughed thinking, what is it in the person that feels like they need to say that? What is that? I don't mind you saying, interesting collection, not really to my taste, I prefer blah, blah, blah. But just the one-liners, you're full of crap, your watches suck, what is it in that person that needs to do that? So to me, the snobbish attitude is similar to that it's really based in nothing other than something, a character defect in the snob. That's what it's based in. Now, of course, there's a reaction to it, and that's because the other aspect is sometimes denied, which is that, you know, the real measurable qualities and differences in watches, and that you can recognize those without being a snob. It's just not having the attitude, not being a wanker or a snob or whatever, right? So those two things need to be teased apart. If we can lose the attitude, the snobbish attitude, then the conversation around differences becomes more meaningful and less charged. But I think that conversation can only happen if the folks that confuse the two and dislike snobbery realize and can be open to this, that there's real discernment possible with different qualities of watches. There's really, you know, there is a difference between a $500 Seiko and a $3,000 Omega, or between a $3,000 Omega and an $8,000 Rolex. There are real differences. There's nothing wrong with preferring anything, right? That's where the snobbery comes in. It says, no, you're wrong. Totally larger one is not the big one. What is it? The blanking. The one that Jeffrey McMahon likes. It's the Big Daddy. So I could see myself getting a Submariner someday. As I've said before, there are watches that I will get first. Like, I probably will get a Breitling Navitimer before a Rolex. I probably will get a Breguet Transatlantic before a Rolex. All right, to continue, I'm probably going to have this as a separate video because it's for those of you who don't make videos, when you have two separate shoots, if you're using just the YouTube editor, you have to upload each, which takes a while, and then you have to combine them, which takes a while. I'm starting to also prefer to make slightly shorter segments that I upload separately and calling them part 1, part 2, that sort of thing. So forgive me, this is a continuation of part 1. My last battery just died, and I actually luckily had a second battery in the car. So, as I was saying, I was talking about Rolex. I don't, my issues with Rolex are really the snobbery and wankery that comes from certain fans of the brand. And also, I don't resonate with some of the cultural significance of getting your. That said, I don't love their watches. I just don't. There are some Rolexes that I really, really like. There are even a few that, if I'm in a situation to afford one, and I've gotten other watches first that I would like to get first, I could see myself getting. I could see myself getting a GMT Master 2, like Don Haynes's. I love that watch. Well, maybe not love it. I really, really like it. I could see myself getting a Submariner, no date, Sea Dweller type. Whatever the slight Rolex, it's just not part of my own culture. It doesn't mean anything to me, right? It's just not. I'm not in the corporate world. If I was in the corporate world, I would get it. Yeah, you sometimes you want to get that watch that says, "Listen, I've made it. I'm now sitting in the boardroom. I need to wear a Rolex." But when I look at the watches themselves and the brand history and heritage, I have nothing but respect and appreciation.